This week, cryptomining malware that launches Linux VMs on Windows and macOS. Oracle patches another actively exploited WebLogic 0-day. LokiBot and NanoCore malware are being distributed in ISO image files. And an anonymous hacker that was exposed after dropping a USB drive while throwing a Molotov cocktail. In the expert commentary, we welcome Tyler Hudak. He's the practice lead of incident response to talk about TrickBot. He's from Trusted Sec too. Did I mention that? He's from Trusted Sec. They're awesome. All that and more on this episode of Hack Naked News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show that brings you the security news each week. And despite popular belief, we do wear pants. It's Hack Naked News. Let the team at Black Hills Information Security test your defenses. With over 10 years of experience in penetration testing, red teaming, and threat hunting, the testers at Black Hills will help you find the holes in your security before the bad guys do. The team at Black Hills cares about educating and sharing their knowledge by creating countless blogs, open source tools, and webcasts for you to learn more about the tradecraft of pen testing and red teaming. Visit securityweekly.com/BHIS to join their mailing list and view the latest blogs and webcasts from Black Hills Information Security. Welcome to Hack Naked News, episode 224 for June 25th, 2019. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, reminding you to register for our upcoming webcast with Domain Tools, SaltStack, ISC Squared, and Viavi Solutions by going to securityweekly.com/webcast. I think we did the Domain Tools one already, though. I could be wrong. We do a lot of webcasts, and they're awesome because the first half is knowledge and information we share from Security Weekly in a general sense, and then the second half is about the vendor's products and technology that relates. I've learned so much just sitting through our webcast. You can subscribe at securityweekly.com/webcast and catch the archive on securityweekly.com/on-demand. And now for the security news this week. Beware, playing untrusted videos on VLC player could cause issues on your computer and lead to compromise. Parsing data is still a hard problem and often leads to these types of vulnerabilities, as we've seen with, countless examples, serialize and deserialization bugs, all the way through compression and playing back videos, right? Discovered by Simon, I'm not even going to try and pronounce your last name, from Pen Test Partners, and identified as CVE 2019-12874, I should say. The first is a high-severity vulnerability that is a double-free issue, which resides in the zlib decompress extra function of VideoLAN VLC player. See, there you go, compression. When it parses a malformed MKV file type with a Matroska demuxer. I don't know, I'm a huge fan of the Matroska demuxer. I don't know about you. But second is a high-risk flaw identified as 2019-5439 and discovered by another researcher, and is a read buffer overflow issue that resides in the read frame function and can be triggered with a malformed AVI video file. So make sure you get your VLC players updated. Cryptomining malware is launching VMs on on Linux VMs on Windows and macOS. This is one way to get your malware to be cross-platform. Not sure if it's the best way, but it is a way by using a combination of QEMU and VirtualBox to run malicious VMs on infected systems. The article states that it's dubbed LoudMiner and also BirdMiner. The attack leverages command line-based virtualization software on target systems to silently boot an image of tiny core Linux OS that already contains, of course, a hacker-activated cryptocurrency mining software. It was spotted by researchers at ESET and Malwarebytes, and attackers are distributing this particular malware bundled with pirated and cracked copies of VST, Virtual Studio Technology software. It's since August of 2018. These VST applications are sound editing programs, sound effects synthesizers, and other advanced editing features that allow you to create music. Now, researchers have found various malicious versions, nearly 137 VST-related applications, 42 of which are for Windows, 95 of which are for macOS, including Propel Ahead Reason, Ableton Live, Nexus, and more. So if you use that software, don't pirate software, first of all. Secondly, go get a real version and look out for anyone that is Trojaning, basically, a lot of these what sounds like plugins for that platform. LokiBot and NanoCore malware are being distributed in ISO image files. It was like new ways to distribute your malware week this week, apparently. So it's interesting how I'm curious how the article didn't state, I want to do more research, how the code gets loaded from an ISO, or if the user has to basically mount that ISO image and double click on an executable. Of course, we all know what ISO images are, right? The legitimate ones, obviously, as we know, tend to be, like 100 meg or more in size. This first clue was that these ISO images were small, range of 1 meg to 2 meg, which is obviously an unusual size for an ISO image. This could be more common since ISO files are often whitelisted by scanning engines. An anonymous hacker, after dropping USB drives while throwing a Molotov cocktail. I have to say I've done some of the pen testing and used USB drives in my pen test. I've never done that while throwing a Molotov cocktail. I'm not sure that's necessarily on my bucket list, but it's bizarre story because he got caught because the police noticed, obviously, you attract attention when you throw Molotov cocktails. And while dropping USB drives at the same time, they were like, wow, like there's flaming bombs coming at our building. And oh, by the way, there's these new USB drives that are being laid on the ground. So police did some research and identified a member of the anonymous Belgium hacker collective. While investigating the arson case, they looked at the thumb drives. The perpetrator was a 35-year-old man from Belgium and was initially arrested after throwing the Molotov cocktail, because, again, that kind of at a bank, nonetheless, because that tends to attract some attention. The police tracked down the suspect because when he dropped the USB thumb drives on the ground after throwing the Molotov cocktails, that led them to his house where they seized his computer and basically made the match between the two. And so he's facing some jail time for sure. Presidential warnings are now easy to spoof. Well, at least, easy air quotes, depending on your skill level, I guess. Also, FCC violations. Like, don't do this. But at the University of Colorado, researchers have demonstrated how to send spoof messages across a small area using portable mobile phone base stations, basically using the wireless emergency alert system that is standard on phones, became a standard a while back. So they've adopted their software to be able to spoof these messages, including messages from the president. And their method exploited problems within the WEA protocol that identified how presidential alerts were created and sent. Using just 4 low-power base stations would let an attacker reach all phones in a small stadium, for example. Fake alerts in crowded cities or stadiums, they state, potentially result in cascades of panic, wrote the researchers. The Firefox zero-day vulnerability, a zero-day, one of 2 that were floating around this week, was used against Coinbase employees to try and steal cryptocurrency. According to indicators of compromise shared by Martin, Martin was the researcher. Attackers would send a spear phishing campaign email luring victims to a web page where, if they used Firefox, it would download and run an info stealer that would collect and exfiltrate browser passwords and other data. The attack was tailored for both Mac and Windows users alike, with different malware for each OS. Mozilla has released on Tuesday, which is today, I believe, 67.0.3 and Firefox ESR 60.7.1 to fix the reported 0 days that are in circulation. Earlier today, these fixes were also merged into the Tor browser with the release of 8.5.2. Oracle's doing more patches for WebLogic. They released an out-of-band update, again, to fix different vulnerabilities in WebLogic servers that was being actively exploited in the wild to hijack user systems. Attackers using this vulnerability were reported by Chinese security firm KnownSec 404 team on June 15th. The initial report from KnownSec claimed the attacks exploited brand new WebLogic bugs that bypass Patches for previous zero-day tracked as CVE 2019, 27, 25, which was also exploited in the wild when that bug was a zero-day. Hundreds of millions of computers are now potentially exposed thanks to a hack in the PC Doctor component. Experts at SafeBreach even discovered the Dell Support Assistant software that comes pre-installed on most Dell PCs was affected by a DLL hijacking vulnerability tracked to CVE 2019 12280. The flaw could have been exploited by an attacker with regular permissions to execute arbitrary code, gain elevated permissions using specially crafted DLL files. Support Assistant is used to check the health of systems, hardware, and software. Of course, has those higher system privileges. So they run with system privileges. I said that. Now, considering that PC Doctor is pre-installed in over 100 million computers, or at least was when they were sold, a lot of people, not all 100 million, have probably reinstalled the operating system on it. Maybe multiple times. Who knows if they reinstalled the utilities or how they got that metric. Suffice it to say, if you get a new PC, the first thing that we do, the first thing that you should do is put a fresh copy of Windows on it. If that's beyond your skill level, go find someone that can. If you have that skill level, be nice and help people out and do that for them. This was distributed with a lot of other different types of hardware as well. We'll take a short break and come back for expert commentary with Tyler Hudak from Trusted Sec. Stay tuned. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM. Welcome back, everyone, to Hack Naked News. We welcome Tyler Hudak. Did I say that right?
Close. Hudak.
Hudak. I knew that.
Good enough.
He is the practice lead of incident response for Trusted Sec. You can visit securityweekly.com/Trusted Sec for more information. All the videos and segments they've done are posted to that page, in addition to more information from the fine folks at Trusted Sec. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And Tyler, yeah, it's nice to have you. TrickBot. It's interesting. We cover a lot of news. I don't often get a chance to dig into every different type of malware. So I've heard of TrickBot. We've mentioned it on the show, but I'm not familiar with it. So for our listeners, kind of start us off about what it is and what's its purpose for the evil, bad people on the internet.
Sure. So TrickBot was originally a financial Trojan, where its goal was to get in there and steal financial information, credentials to banking sites. It would even do web injects into when the victim was on a banking site in order to try to steal money, basically. But in the last couple of years, we've seen that it has kind of progressed from just being a financial Trojan to really expanding its capabilities. And so it's used a lot now is almost like the main backdoor for attackers getting into a network. Typically it will either come in through mail spam or some type of drive-by download, or it will even be a secondary piece of malware that's dropped onto a system after an initial piece of malware like Emotet or something like that. And then once it gets onto the system, it has a number of ways that it can kind of move laterally within the network. And it's usually not the end game for the attacker. The attacker will usually use it as a means to an end. And we've seen things go all the way from, the attacker using TrickBots to deploying ransomware at the end, especially Ryuk ransomware that's been pretty popular recently, or even just using it to attack other systems and use something like PowerShell Empire.
It's interesting. It sounds like in traditional software development, right? They did the initial kind of release of it and used it to steal people's banking information, probably made some modifications to the code, and then went, wow, this is working pretty good. We can use this for other stuff. And it kind of became one of the de facto standards for basically a callback or your initial foothold on the systems.
Yeah, I definitely think that was the case. And even within the last couple months, we've seen a number of improvements made to the malware, which make it more difficult to detect, which make it more difficult to remove. And so, it's definitely being actively developed. I believe too that if you start looking into the infrastructure of it, it's even sold as almost like a software as a service type deal by the bad guys.
Yeah, it sounds like they're selling a malware like it evolved into a malware platform, right?
Right.
Does that break a lot of the detections and make incident response more difficult? Because like at what point does TrickBot not really become TrickBot, right? It's really just the platform that they're tying other things on top of.
It doesn't make response, well, I guess it does make response a little bit more difficult in that when you see TrickBot, you have to start looking for other things as well.
Yeah.
TrickBot itself isn't necessarily that difficult to detect if you know what to look for. But with if TrickBot is on a system, you kind of have to look at two things. You have to look at how did it get there in the first place, which could mean that somebody clicked on the wrong phishing link or opened a malicious attachment, or there could be another piece of malware that put it on there. And then you have to look at, well, why was TrickBot on there? What's interesting is the attackers who are behind TrickBot will typically they'll get their system or they'll get their malware installed on the victims. They'll kind of move laterally a little bit. They'll grab credentials and then they'll go to sleep. And they won't do anything. And we've seen in some of the investigations that we've worked, we've seen where the TrickBot operators will go to sleep for a couple of days, up to a couple months at a time, and I know some other organizations have seen it where they've gone to sleep for over a year.
Wow.
So there could be a very long amount of time that you have to look at, and you can't just go back, a couple of weeks or so in order to figure out everything that was going on.
Now, Tyler, when you say go to sleep, is it maintain a backdoor communication channel, a phone home to tell the attackers that it's still there, or does it go to like sleep?
No, it does maintain a backdoor communication. It does basically like a heartbeat to check in every once in a while. Typically, TrickBot will be set up to be persistent on the system through either a scheduled task or as a service. It all depends on how it got onto the system and what rights it has. But it will wake up every so often and go out and check its command and control to see if there's a new configuration file for it, to see if basically to make sure that there aren't any commands for it to do.
Receive new commands from its master.
Exactly. And those are most of the time when I say it's in sleep, what I mean is it goes out and it checks maybe like every so many minutes or so many hours. And then it won't have anything there. And so it'll just kind of go to sleep for so long. And, there'll be long periods of time where it has nothing to do.
It's interesting, as it seems like more like a framework. I'm sure that backdoor communication channel is probably an option that can be swapped out, right? And it sounds like on the fly. So it phones home one method, gets a new configuration, then it could conceivably phone home via another method.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting about TrickBot is it's modular. So where it gets most of its capabilities is it will go out and it will download different modules, and the modules, all they are DLLs that are downloaded and loaded into the malware. But each of those modules, they have different capabilities. So there'll be one module that's used for extracting browser credentials or artifacts that are like form data that's stored in the browser. There's one that's specific to point of sale systems. There's one that uses Eternal Blue to move like a worm within the environment. And there are a couple others as well. But each of those modules, they have their own configuration file. And so each of those modules, they may be communicating back to a different command and control channel or server, or even sending different data to different locations on the internet. So one of the difficult parts in once you've detected TrickBot, to stopping it is figuring out where all those systems are so that you can block all those command and control channels, because you can't just block one. It's not like traditional malware where it's only communicating with one single IP, or maybe it's fast flux and a single domain and that has multiple IPs behind it. Each each module may have a different, number of IP addresses that it's communicating with.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of analysts, myself included, when we do threat hunting and find, backdoor communication channel, and then we see it stop, you sometimes can assume, like, if I can't find anything else in that particular scenario, maybe the system was wiped, maybe something scrubbed it off the system,
Right.
and I'm good to go. But in this case, it could just be using a different method and a different technique that's being swapped out dynamically, which tells us we need to do threat hunting all the time, right? And look
Right.
for different
Oh, yeah.
types of anomalous behavior.
Yep, absolutely. TrickBot itself, I guess if there was a good thing, when in the samples that we've looked at,
Mhm.
there have been a couple different things that are common between them. So when
Sure.
you are doing threat hunting, it becomes a little bit easier to detect it. For some reason, TrickBot likes to use port 449 when
Mhm.
communicating to its command and control servers. Not always. We've seen 443 used. We've seen 447 and a couple others, but a lot of the IP addresses use 449. So any outgoing 449 traffic that you see is definitely a red flag. If you have the ability to do something like search your host for specific directories,
Mhm.
it likes to put itself into the user's app data roaming directory.
Mhm.
It'll create a legitimate looking directory underneath that, but the executable will be in there, and there will also be a data directory usually, and that's where the modules are contained. So if you can see that, or if you can look at all the tasks on your network and you see something's pointing to a app data roaming
Mhm.
directory
Right.
in a task, then definitely something to look into.
Gotcha. So there are some commonalities, but when you find one of those indicators, you don't know what you're getting yourself into until you do a full investigation.
Right, exactly.
Awesome. Well, Tyler, thank you so much for appearing on Hack Naked News. That was some great information, especially for our threat hunting listeners out there. So again, thank you. And with that will conclude this episode of Hack Naked News. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. See you next time.